Your son called last Sunday. You picked up on the second ring, the way you always do. And the conversation lasted maybe 11 minutes. He talked about work, about the kids, about how busy things have been. You said, "That's wonderful," and "I understand," and, "Of course. Don't worry about me." And when you hung up the phone, you sat there in that chair, the one by the window, and you felt something you didn't quite have a word for. Not anger, not sadness exactly, something quieter than that, a kind of hollow feeling, like an echo in an empty room. And you thought to yourself, is this just how things are now? I want to sit with you in that moment, because what you felt in those 11 minutes is one of the most honest and important feelings a human being can experience. And most people spend the rest of their lives running away from it. You see, the truth about relationships, and I have turned this over in my mind for a very long time, is that most of them don't fall apart because of cruelty or betrayal. They don't collapse because someone did something unforgivable. They drift, they thin out, like fabric that has been washed so many times it becomes almost transparent. And we stand there holding it, wondering when it changed, wondering if it was something we did, wondering if we should say something, or simply keep pretending the fabric is still thick and warm. This is the quiet grief of later life that almost no one speaks about honestly. The friendships that used to fill a Saturday afternoon, now reduced to a card at Christmas. The long marriage that has grown so familiar. It has become almost invisible, two people moving through the same house like planets in separate orbits. The neighbor you used to wave to from the driveway, who moved away 3 years ago and took a piece of your daily rhythm with her. Nobody tells you that one of the great losses of growing older isn't the loss of people through death. It's the loss of closeness through time. And here is what I want you to understand. What I want you to really sit with. The disconnection you feel is not a sign that something has gone wrong with you. It is not evidence that you failed at love or friendship or family. It is the natural consequence of a misunderstanding that runs so deep in the way we think about relationships that almost no one ever questions it. And that misunderstanding is this: we believe that a relationship is something you have, something you own, something you build once and then keep, the way you keep a house or a car. We say things like, holding on to a friendship, or keeping a marriage together, as if love were a physical object that might fall and shatter if we loosened our grip for even a moment. But a relationship is not a thing. It is a living process. It is more like music than like furniture. And you cannot hold music. You cannot store it in a drawer and take it out when you need it. Music only exists while it is being played. And the moment you try to capture it, to freeze it, to make it stay exactly as it was, it stops being music and becomes silence. I think of the long marriages I have observed, the ones that reach 40, 50, 60 years. And I notice something very interesting. The couples who seem most at peace are not the ones who never fought or never drifted or never felt that hollow Sunday afternoon feeling. They are the ones who somehow learned, sometimes without ever putting it into words, that the person beside them was not the same person they married. That they themselves were not the same person who stood at the altar or signed the license at the courthouse. And rather than experiencing this as a loss, they experienced it as a kind of wonder. Imagine that, they seemed to say without speaking. We have become entirely different people, and here we still are. That is not nothing. That is extraordinary. This is what I mean when I say that the deepest wisdom in relationships is the wisdom of non-attachment. Now, I want to be careful here, because people often misunderstand this idea. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean loving less or caring less or building walls around yourself so nothing can hurt you anymore. That is not freedom. That is a different kind of prison, and a lonelier one. What non-attachment means is simply this: you allow the people you love to be what they actually are, rather than demanding that they remain what they once were. You allow the relationship itself to move and change and breathe, the way a living thing must breathe, rather than pressing it between glass like a dried flower and wondering why it has lost its color. Think about your adult children for a moment. Think about how you knew them at 7 years old. How they ran toward you. How they needed you in a way that was so complete and uncomplicated. It felt like the purest thing in the world. And now they are 40 or 45 or 50. They have their own children, their own mortgages, their own exhaustions, their own private inner lives that you will never fully see. And somewhere in the transition, somewhere between the child who ran toward you and the adult who calls on Sundays for 11 minutes, you lost the version of the relationship that felt most like love to you. And so you grieve it, quietly, mostly, on Sunday afternoons, and you wonder if they still need you. And the honest answer is not in the same way. But that does not mean they don't love you. It means love has changed its shape. And if you can find it in yourself to stop searching for the old shape, to stop measuring the present relationship against the memory of the earlier one, you might discover that what exists now has its own kind of beauty. Less urgent, perhaps, less dependent, but real, honest, adult, and in its own way, more equal than anything you shared before. There is a man I think about often. A retired schoolteacher from the Midwest, the kind of man who coached Little League for 20 years. And knew every family in his neighborhood by name. When he retired, he lost something he hadn't expected to lose. He thought retirement meant freedom. And in many ways it did. But he hadn't understood how much of his sense of self had been built inside of his relationships at work. The colleagues who needed his guidance. The students who looked at him with that particular kind of attention that makes a person feel genuinely useful in the world. And without that, without the daily structure of being needed and being seen, he found himself sitting in a beautiful house with his wife of 37 years, feeling, for the first time in his adult life, profoundly invisible. His wife saw it. She didn't say much about it directly. She was a wise woman, but she started doing something very small. She started asking him questions she already knew the answers to, not to be patronizing, but because she understood, in her quiet way, that what he needed was not solutions. What he needed was to be heard, to have his voice matter to someone in the room. And slowly, without either of them announcing it, their marriage became something it had never quite been before. Not the passionate marriage of young people, not the busy partnership of middle age, but something more intimate than either of those. A real conversation, finally, after 37 years. And this is the surprising truth I want to leave with you. The relationships of later life have a depth available to them that younger people simply cannot access. Because by the time you have reached your 50s and 60s, you have been humbled. You have been wrong enough times to know that you are not always right. You have lost enough people to understand that presence is not guaranteed. You have been disappointed and have disappointed others. And have, if you are willing to be honest with yourself, made peace with the fact that you are imperfect in ways you cannot entirely fix. And that humility, that beautiful, hard-won humility, is the single greatest gift you can bring to any relationship, because it allows you to stop performing, to stop presenting the version of yourself you think other people want to see, and simply be the one who is actually there, sitting in the chair, holding the phone, feeling the hollow echo of a Sunday afternoon. The philosopher in me wants to say this as plainly as I can. Every moment of genuine human connection, every moment when two people actually see each other, without pretense, without agenda, without the noise of expectation, that moment is complete in itself. It needs nothing added to it. It does not need to last forever to be real. It does not need to be reciprocated in exactly the right way to have value. The 11 minutes with your son, there was love in those 11 minutes. Perhaps buried under busyness and awkward silences and the mutual pretending that everyone is fine. But it was there, and you can choose, if you are willing, to feel that love, rather than measuring it against the love you wish it were. The old Zen teachers used to say that enlightenment is not a destination you arrive at. It is the simple act of paying full attention to exactly where you are. And I believe the same is true of love. Love is not something you finally achieve after all. The conditions are right and all the people behave the way you need them to behave. Love is attention. Love is showing up, in whatever small way, is available to you, and being genuinely present for the person in front of you. Your neighbor, your old friend from church who you haven't called in 6 months. Your spouse of 30, 40 years who you sometimes forget to actually look at. Your son who calls on Sundays for 11 minutes, and doesn't quite know how to say that he misses you too. So here is what I am asking you to consider. Not as an assignment, not as something you must fix or improve or schedule into your week. Just as a quiet invitation. The next time you feel that hollow echo, that particular loneliness of later life, that comes not from being alone, but from feeling unseen, I want you to pause before reaching for something to fill it. Before turning on the television or refreshing your phone, or telling yourself that this is simply how things are now, I want you to sit with the feeling for just a moment. Because inside that feeling, underneath the loneliness and the wishing things were different, there is something very precious. There is the truth of how much you care. And a person who still cares this deeply, after everything life has given them and taken from them, is not someone whose best days of love are behind them. They are someone standing at the beginning of the most honest and meaningful connections of their entire life. The only question is whether you are willing to reach toward them. Not with the urgency of youth, not with demands or expectations or old scorecards of who said what and who didn't call when they should have, but with the open and unhurried hands of someone who finally understands what was always true. That this moment, this ordinary, imperfect, fleeting moment, is the only place where love has ever actually lived.